and welcome to that was a very niche impression of Terry Wogan. You probably don't even know, but there you go. Anyway, welcome to another home session. This week we are looking at loving God with all your strength. I want to see like your best like strength poses. Just flex for me. Oh wow, look at your muscles. Wow, what have you been doing during lockdown? Like 50 press-ups a day? You look insane. Anyway, last week we looked at the wise and foolish builders and how we should build our life upon something strong, because when storms come, our houses could come tumbling down if it's not built upon something strong enough. And this week is kind of a continuation of that, because as we know, storms do come in our lives. Periods of sadness or fear or uncertainty come to threaten our lives. And when those things happen, we have a choice. We can either give in to the fear and to the sadness, or we can choose to believe and trust in God. Hopefully you've watched the story of Joseph and you know it well enough for this to make sense. But Joseph, at the beginning of his life, had a great life. He was loved by his dad, he was the favourite son, he got given a fancy coat, and he has dreams given to him by God about his brothers bowing down to him. What a life! And yet, even though his life is going pretty well, his perfect life came crumbling down because his brothers decided to beat him up and throw him into a well and then ultimately sell him to be a slave. Now, throughout his life crumbling, from being a slave to being a servant to being arrested and put in jail for something he didn't do, and for staying in jail for a long time, possibly going to be executed at any moment, Joseph had a choice. He could have given into the fear, he could have given into the sadness, and he could have moped around and been really upset and miserable and said, God, you've abandoned me and you hate me and I don't believe in you anymore because look at my life right now, it's an absolute mess. But he didn't do that. Instead, he continued to believe and trust in God. He continued to serve God. He continued to worship God, as we looked at last week. And through that time, things worked out for him pretty well eventually. He basically became the Prime Minister of Egypt. He was second in command of the whole of Egypt, and we know how the story ends, and his brothers come back to him, don't recognize him, and he gets reunited with them, and they do bow down to him because he is in power. And he says this, he says, the things that you did that intended to harm me, God has worked for good. In other words, even though bad things were happening in his life, he continued to trust in God, he continued to believe in God and love God, and God saw him through the tough times. When we're feeling sad or anxious, it's easy to give up on God. When we can see things going wrong in the world, it's easy to stop believing in God and to think that God isn't there. But God made a promise to us. He said he will always be there for us. And when God makes a promise, he always keeps it. As we've seen throughout the whole of the Bible, God keeps his promises. Courage is being afraid of doing something, but doing it anyway. And it's the same with God. It's choosing to put your trust in God. It's choosing to love God no matter what the circumstances. My friend told me this phrase that she'd heard and I loved it so much, so I'm going to use it now. It's not a question of what if. What if things never go back to normal? What if schools continue to stay closed? What if I never see my friends again? It's a question of even if. Even if schools are closed forever. Even if the country is on lockdown forever. Even if I never see my friends and family again, I will choose to love and trust in God. Even if things go completely wrong, I will continue to trust in God and know that he will work bad things for good. He will turn my misery into joy. He will turn my tears into laughter. And I choose to trust that. Even in this time, it's the thing that's getting me through this, is that even though the world feels as if it's crumbling around us, actually, God is still there. God is still working, and we're seeing good things happen in the world through God. God is doing amazing things in this time. And sometimes we can't see it. And sometimes it's only when we come out on the other side that we do see what God has been up to. That's why I keep a prayer journal and write down things that I'm praying for. Because at the time it looks like things are hopeless, but when I look back in it in 3 months' time, I can see God working through those situations all the time. It's about loving God with all your strength, even when you're not feeling strong. It's about digging deep and saying, you know what, I will. Even though everything around me says that I shouldn't, I will believe and I will trust in God. I hope you have a really great week. And if you're not having a great week and things are falling apart around you, I want you to know that God loves you, God cares about you, he adores you, and he is looking out for you, even if it doesn't always feel like it. I shall see you next week. But until then, goodbye!